It's legal.
All right, everyone, welcome back to like a part two of this workshop. We're thrilled everybody returned post lunch. I love to see all the happy faces. Once again, I am Rachel. This is Priyanka, and on Zoom we have like Jayshree, who I believe is going to give the sort of opening comments. Okay, we'll pass it to you. Yeah. You're on mute, and just like tell us when you want me to change slide.
Cool. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, hi everyone. I'm really excited that we're continuing on with the second part of this session. For those of you who are not here, I'm Jayshree. I'm a postdoc at Columbia. I'm joining Northwestern. And this is the second part of the workshop on DP beyond algorithms. And this will be kind of a deep dive following the first part that many of you attended this morning. I'm joining virtually due to COVID, so I'm really sorry I can't be there, but really excited to see everyone over the screen. So next slide, please. Just a quick shout out to my collaborators who co-organized this workshop, Rachel and Priyanka, who are here with you in person, as well as Gabe Kaptchuk and Elissa Redmiles, who were also very pivotal in the planning process. So in this room, we are lucky to have people from a range of disciplines thinking about socio-technical aspects of differential privacy, from communication and design to socio-technical systems and evaluation. And next slide. In today's workshop, we are excited to kind of leverage this diversity of people that we have in this room and all of the excitement around the aspects of differential privacy beyond just the algorithmic and technical sides. So the goal of today's workshop is to first and foremost foster community around advancing socio-technical aspects of differential privacy deployments. And with that, we want to also collaboratively generate future research directions around these topics and form collaborations, mentorships, and collective kind of thinking and research around the ideas that we're most interested in. And as we talked a little bit about in the morning session, we want to continue to develop community principles around doing this type of work. We want to kind of collectively define what it means to be part of this community, what it means to advance a vision for responsible differential privacy deployments. Next slide, please. So we have a jam-packed agenda for today. So we're going to start off with this short introduction and also get all of you in the room talking to each other. Then we're very excited to hear from our speakers, Joe Neer, Ryan Steed, and Aiping Zhang. After the break, we will dive deeper into the themes that were raised by the short talks and led by some amazing junior scholars. We'll go into these breakout sessions ranging from implementing DP in practice to crafting law and policy for DP deployments. And finally, we'll share back and wrap up, and excited to hear your thoughts as well on what you would like in order for this community to stay connected and keep growing. Next slide. So depending on how many people are in the room, Rachel and Priyanka, I think I'll let you kind of take the call, and if we can kind of go around the room and do introductions with everyone, or if we should do it in small groups. But I'd love for people to kind of get to know each other if you don't already, and share your name, your role, one thing you're excited about for the field of differential privacy as a whole, and what brings you specifically to the workshop today.
I think based on timing and room size, which is full, and I love it. Let's still go around in the room and give your name and affiliation and your role and a one single maximum one sentence summary of things that you are excited about. So I will start. Rachel Cummings. I'm faculty and I'm at Columbia, and I'm excited to build a community together.
Hi everyone, Priyanka Nanayakkara, incoming postdoc at Harvard, and I'm excited for tools that can make DP more usable and the community stuff.
Hello, my name is Aiping Xiong. I'm a faculty member at Penn State. I'm very excited to bring some psychological angle into the development and deployment of DP.
Hi, I'm James Bailey from the Harvard Statistics Department, a PhD student there. I'm excited to see the growth of this workshop from last year.
Hi, my name is Joe Neer. I'm a faculty member at the University of Vermont, and I think I'm excited to see how much people outside this room now care about what people inside this room are doing.
Hi, my name is Onyinye Dibia, a PhD student at the University of Vermont. I'm excited to see how far we go with finding better ways to communicate DP concepts.
Hi, I'm Ivy from the University of Vermont, and I'm excited about the adoption of DP in practice and applying DP in machine learning and generative AI.
Hi, I'm Priyanka. I'm a PhD student at UVM, and I'm excited about the utility part of differential privacy.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chika Ibua. I am a research associate here at Harvard, formerly a PhD student at UVM as well. I'm really excited to see how we can just improve education around differential privacy, especially for people from different sorts of backgrounds.
Hi, I'm Palak. I'm a PhD student at Boston University, and I'm excited for us to kind of think more carefully about privacy implementations beyond DP as well as with DP.
Hi, I'm Sachit. I'm very excited to talk to all of you and then maybe take that language and talk to some of the math people I work with.
Excited about telling where you studied.
Oh, I'm a PhD student at Boston University.
Hi, I'm Moshe. I'm a PhD student at Hebrew U. I'm excited to realize that seems like the community is moving closer and closer to looking for like instance optimal things and beyond like just general worst case, which means there is a better chance of actually implementing things in the real world.
Hi, I'm Jiayuan. I'm a PhD student at National University of Singapore, and I'm excited to learn how DP is used and can be used more in various applications.
Hello, this is Sardar. I am working in computational neuroscience here in Harvard. So I am just curious about these DP aspects, which I neglected up to now. So this is my aim.
Hi, my name's Adam Smith. I'm a 17th year faculty member. Boston University. I guess I'm what am I excited about for the DP field? It is exciting to see how much it has broadened and how many interesting opportunities there are to see it put to use. And essentially that's what brings me to the workshop today.
Hi, I'm Sharon Ayalde. I am a Director of Community Engagement for OpenDP. I'm just excited about building community because, that's what I do.
Hi, I'm Tamalika. I'm a postdoc at Columbia with Rachel. And I'm excited to see this community grow and to have more people involved and to have like long-lasting discussions with everyone here.
Hi, I'm Amina. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan in the School of Information, and I'm excited to be thinking about sort of context of, especially like institutional and organizational context of different DP deployments as DP is increasingly deployed.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm a PhD student at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm excited to see all of you, and I'm also excited to see DP start to sort of find its place in the world of policy and privacy.
Hi, I'm Roy. I'm a PhD student here at Harvard. I think I'm most excited about making notions of privacy easier to get right.
Hi, I'm Simpson Garfinkel, and I'm excited to announce that my general interest book on differential privacy will be published by MIT Press in the spring. And anybody here who wants to have your first published book review as a graduate student, please email me and I'll get you an advanced copy. And that way you can all have your publications.
Hi everyone, I'm Seyoung. I am a graduate student at Columbia working with Rachel. I'm excited about learning how to explain this theoretical DP guarantees in terms of the, layman's language.
Hi, I'm Pavel from US Census Bureau. I'm excited about the topic of this session.
Hi, I'm Philip Leclerc. I also work at the US Census Bureau as, I guess, like a privacy engineer on some level there. I'm excited to see that the community seems to have sort of a persistent and growing interest in trying to directly tackle some of the issues that come up every day and trying to sort of construct a responsible decision-making process for the kinds of parameters and other things that come up in building a DP implementation in practice.
Awesome. Do the Zoom folks want to introduce themselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Dana Boyd. I'm at Microsoft Research and Georgetown, and I'm interested in how DP is forcing a reckoning with all forms of data.
Hi, my name's Carter. I'm a PhD student at the University of Arkansas. I think that this workshop conversation has a lot of overlap with my interest with interpretable machine learning, explainable machine learning. So I want to kind of see where that goes.
Hello everyone, I'm Mina, PhD student at University of Auckland, New Zealand. I'm excited to learn how we can find optimal balance between privacy and accuracy in practice.
We can't really see how many people are on Zoom. So if anybody hasn't introduced themselves and would like to, please do.
Hello, I am Sharvajit. So I am a student from IIT Kanpur. I am currently at India. So my interest to this session is that I work in language model, and in the language model settings, there are a lot of, non-technical backgrounds requires. So for example, we have to deal with various languages that are sometimes code mixed, and then we have to find what are the privacy units there. So yeah, those are the things which I think go beyond the algorithmic reach. So yeah, that's interest me in today's discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that was everyone.
Great.
Feel free to jump in if we missed you.
Okay.
Awesome. And yeah, I introduced myself already, but I think I'm really excited to see how much this workshop has grown since last year. As someone else pointed out, it was hard for me to see on Zoom, but then just kept hearing more and more names. So that's very, very exciting. And also to have such a wealth of expertise and different experiences in the room, I think is really valuable. So thank you all for being here. And speaking of community, we talked a little bit in the morning about community principles. And like we said, this is just a starting point that we, the organizers, came up with for some guidelines that we can think of as we start to continue to build out this community, and also bringing in some of the suggestions from the morning. So encouraging rigorous, effective interdisciplinary work. And as someone A couple people pointed out in the morning, respect for non-technical fields, and working across different fields with equal footing. Being aware of how our own personal perspectives can impact and enrich our work. Being thoughtful and precise with how we represent differential privacy, especially as we continue to interface with different and new communities. And of course, welcoming and supporting junior members of the community. And I think this is something that we've all experienced as we've been part of this community, and we're excited to see that kind of generous spirit continue to grow. Next slide, please. So throughout this workshop, we will also be collaboratively generating research directions for the community, and we'll specifically be hearing about this from our speakers, but we wanted to just give you a few to think about before we continue with the rest of the session. So a few kind of frontiers that we as the organizers are interested in and think are important. One is considerations for use of differential privacy. So establishing processes for higher level decision-making around differential privacy. How do we decide whether or not DP is the right approach? How do we just justify this decision to different parties? The second one is building participatory deployment pipelines. Thinking about what parties should be involved in making decisions and how should their needs and preferences be included and prioritized. The third is leveraging the feature of DP that allows us to be transparent about implementation decisions, but how can we do so in an effective way? Going simply beyond making code available. How can we make transparency legible to the right audiences in a way that encourages thoughtful engagement? And then the final one is using our socio-technical analyses to funnel back into the theoretical work that many of you are also heavily involved with. So thinking about how can we use our social analyses to question assumptions and map those back to real world thinking? How can we identify what are currently usable and bounds and theoretical statements and that exist in the literature versus ones that we need to continue to develop in the literature that can be useful to practitioners. So these are just a few research directions that we are interested in, but I'm sure we'll hear about a lot more from our speakers. And so to introduce our speakers, I'm going to hand it back to Rachel. And very excited to hear from all three of our speakers.
Okay, so we have this is off. Need some technical assistance. Did I stop sharing? Okay. So our first speaker is going to be Joe Neer, who is an associate professor at the University of Vermont. He has extensive expertise in topics including differential privacy, security, programming languages, machine learning, and a lot more. He's done a wide range of like a DP work, including especially usability of like a DP software and sort of like evaluating DP deployments.
Can I be made a presenter? So that I
think
can
I
share
can. How can we use this with this? Hi. Take it away, Joe. Oh, well, that wasn't good. No, that's me. Oh, sorry. Sorry. I'm a computer scientist. If you could just change back to
Oh, got it.
I don't know why.
Okay, this is, yeah, this is very visible. Okay. So my name's Joe Neer. I am going to be talking a lot about work that I'm doing with my amazing students who are in the back here. All three of them are here. So Ivy's back here, and Oninye and Priyanka. So you can see what I look like, so I didn't bother to put my picture here. There is a QR code here, and that's just to get you to the slides. So if you want like a copy of the slides, they are available. The QR code also appears at the end, so if you decide you want the slides at the end, you can still get them. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these 4 points. And what I tried to do when I wrote these 4 points down is I tried to summarize what are the things that have come up throughout this week that I thought were really interesting. What are the things that me and my students are working on that I think is really important, and what are like my personal feelings about the problems that I'm seeing. And so like a lot of these, so I don't have answers for any of these really, which is probably not a surprise. But I have some more specific questions, and like I'm hoping to actually to get some help trying to solve some of these problems. So like a lot of these questions are things I actually think somebody else might know and might be able to tell me. But before I talk about the individual ones, one of the things that I wanted to mention before I get into that is that these kinds of points are ones that came up again and again all week, both at the OpenDP meeting and at TPDP. And that is a big change from last year and any previous time, in my opinion, right? So people are asking these questions because they are trying to get differential privacy to work for real. And they were able to ignore these questions in the past, and like they can't anymore. And I think that's really, really exciting. I think there's people in this room who've been at this a lot longer than me, and they deserve all the credit for like making a lot of the progress on these questions so far. But I think it's really exciting to see that people who haven't been part of this community are like listening now. And so I think we have some opportunities to really make an impact on these things. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about tools. This is, I think, the thing where I have the most that we've already finished that I can talk about. So there are differential privacy tools now that claim that they are usable, that they are easy to use. This is a screenshot from Tumult Analytics, who I'm picking on because in the next slide I'll be picking on other tools. But it says right here it's easy to use. So we were wondering, like, how true is that? Like, are these tools, are they actually usable yet, or do we have a ways to go? And what do they need to be more usable? And so this is work that's led by Ivy, who's in the back here. We did a study where we evaluated 4 different tools. And this paper, she just gave the presentation in SOUPS last week. And so we interviewed 24 data practitioners. Half of them were experts in differential privacy, half of them were not. And we gave them tasks and said, please use the tool to do a thing. And what we found is a real mixture of, the tools were very different from each other, right? So these were the 4 tools. This is my best attempt at kind of summarizing what were the differences between the tools. And I'm going to use this table to talk about what are we doing okay at, and what do we need to do better at. So prevented violations is like, did people get the program correct, or did it violate differential privacy? Completion rate is, did they finish the task they were supposed to do? Satisfaction was how much did they like using the tool? So a big thing for me was there's a lot of tools that aren't really preventing differential privacy violations. And there are tools that are doing a good job of this, right? So OpenDP and Tumult Analytics, I think, both do a pretty good job of this, but this is a thing that our tools really should strive to do. And I think we kind of have a good idea of how to do it, and we just need to make sure that we do it. The satisfaction of people with the tools did not correlate with how well it prevented violations. So we should be very careful about asking people, do you like the tool? Because they may love the tool and it still may not be preventing violations. So I think these violations are like the top bullet point here. Please, please, please don't implement your own differential privacy. I think as people are deploying differential privacy in more contexts, there's always kind of I think there's a tendency in general to say, I can do that. That doesn't seem so hard. You know, I'm going to build my in-house solution because there's nothing out there that's exactly my use case. I'm really nervous about that because it's so easy to make these mistakes. Even the experts in our study, we asked them to do very simple things. They made small mistakes that violated differential privacy. So I think we have some ideas of how to prevent those violations. I think there's also some usability things that folks are really doing a much better job of now, like following existing APIs when we can, you know, working on documentation. You know, these are things that definitely came up in our study, and absolutely, like, people are working on these now. Is there a question?
Can you give an example of how people are trying to do DP and failing, like the like prevents violations? No.
Yeah. So one good example was we asked them to do a sum of you know, one of the columns of a data set, and to do a sum, you have to clip things unless you already know something about what the data looks like. And we had experts in our study who said, I know I need to clip this thing and do something about the sensitivity of it, but they weren't exactly sure how to accomplish that with the API. And so they used a function that just summed everything up and added noise to it without clipping first. And the function didn't tell them that there's a problem, you should have clipped this thing first. So Tumult and OpenDP kind of don't let you do that. They say, you've got to clip this first. It doesn't have bounded sensitivity otherwise. Diffprivilib, for example, has functions that appear to sum up the thing and add noise, but they don't force you to do the clipping.
Thank you.
So the kind of, you know, thing that I'm curious about at this point is one of the claims of some of these tools is we want to get to a point where they can be used by non-experts. Can we ever really get there? I'm not sure. I think the model in machine learning is like maybe instructive. In machine learning, there's lots of frameworks and they're very useful, but nobody says, you know, somebody who knows nothing about machine learning can use PyTorch, right? Like, that's not the point of it. Maybe the point of OpenDP should be, you know, semi-experts can use it to build stuff that's not broken, or something like that, right? I think what is the point of these tools is something that we should think about. Okay, so how do we describe privacy risk? This thing has come up over and over and over again. I think we're kind of getting to the point where people are like, we're never going to explain epsilon perfectly. We need to like take some other, you know, approach to this. So we started doing this study a little while ago, where we were like, can we build a thing that will have structure to it that will let us communicate with a wider audience about what a differential privacy guarantee means, so that they can actually evaluate whether it's good or not. And following a lot of other great research in this area, we were kind of hoping maybe if we get the right thing, we can like show it to a person who doesn't know much about differential privacy, and they'll be able to learn something from it. And so we have been doing some interviews with experts to ask them, you know, how should we do this? In particular, like, are there things that we can tell to people along with like, what is the normal range for this thing, so that somebody who doesn't know that normal range can evaluate whether the particular point you've chosen is good or not, right? And the kind of, so we've done a bunch of interviews now, and the kind of general consensus is like, no, you can't do this, right? Or like, at least we can't do this now, right? So one of the things that we saw is there's really not consensus. There is consensus that we don't have consensus on what are the acceptable values for parameters, right? Like epsilon, we don't really know. And, you know, we interviewed people who work in machine learning that are like, yeah, epsilon of 100 in some cases is great, right? And lots of other people said, no, it really should be closer to 1. And everybody kind of admitted we really don't know. So how can we do this for people who are non-experts? I think we're a long ways off from that, probably, right? So one of my favorite quotes from these interviews is, experts are not always good at communicating with other experts, believe it or not, right? So I think that one of the things that did come up in these interviews is we're maybe not communicating with each other very well about differential privacy guarantees. In particular, there are a lot of kind of important things about differential privacy releases where the details are buried in a white paper somewhere. They're kind of hard to find. You know, I think we're in danger of moving towards a place where you could have differential privacy used as a tool for privacy washing, where, you know, we say, oh yeah, we're doing differential privacy, so everything's great, but actually the parameters are set so that it doesn't have a meaningful effect on privacy. And the thing I really worry about is that people, the general public, is going to start to realize differential privacy is not a serious thing, right? If this happens enough, differential privacy won't have the kind of seriousness behind it that it does now, and that I would like to see it continue to have. So can we build something for experts that's a structural thing that says, here's what you should disclose and what you better disclose and how, and make sure everybody has to fill out the whole form, is kind of our new target, and we're kind of working on writing this up now. Okay, so the third thing, how do we convince the data users? Lots of people have talked about a thing that I tried to put into a visual form here, right? Like a theme that's come up again and again this week is there's lots of people involved in differential privacy deployments. It's not like one person, for example, trying to navigate the privacy utility trade-off. There's like lots of people. And if you draw the Venn diagram, the circles don't overlap very much, right? In particular, the champions of differential privacy are like maybe overlapping with the privacy engineers, but like definitely not with all these other people. And I use the word stakeholders in the title of the slide here. I don't like the word stakeholders that much because I think it gets used when we're not sure what word to use. But I put people in charge here, like people call this policymakers or decision makers sometimes. Like, I don't know, these are all the people, but the point of this is that there's lots of different people and they all have different incentives and they don't overlap very much. So, I think thinking about things this way, instead of like there's a person who's going to figure out how to do the thing, and that person, we just need to help that person. I think thinking about this picture where we have all these different people who need to talk to each other is maybe a thing we ought to be doing. So I have lots of questions about how to do that. I don't know how to do that, but it's a thing we ought to be trying to do. So these don't overlap. So maybe we could get to a picture more like this, where like lots of privacy engineers are also champions of differential privacy. Maybe we have some hope of getting to this picture, right? But so there was maybe on the panel at TPDP, Ashwin said, nobody wants differential privacy. And I think what he meant was like, these people don't want it. You're not going to move this circle, the champions, to overlap with this circle, probably. And like maybe that's wrong, but that's my best guess, right? So in practice, what actually happens, even if you get to this picture, is really like a negotiation between groups. It's not, it's not one group optimizing. It's two groups negotiating with each other. So how do we do that now? So I think this is an area where I'm curious how we do this now. I know maybe a little bit about how we do this now based on what's public, but this is a spreadsheet, for example, that the Census Bureau published about error in demonstration products. It has a bunch of columns that report like accuracy metrics for a bunch of pieces of data, right? So these are the things that I would imagine people are using to do these negotiations. These metrics, are they accomplishing what we want them to? Is like maybe a thing that everybody knows the answer to, but I'm curious about that, right? Do people understand these metrics? Are these metrics effective for like figuring out whether the people who are going to use the data actually can use it to do what they want, right? So maybe the answer is yes, and we know how to do this, and I'd be curious if that's true. So one of the things that we're trying to do in this area, and this is a newer project that's led by Priyanka, we would like to build tools for that negotiation process, right? So can we talk to the people who are going to be using the data and figure out what their utility goals are going to be? I think it may be important to be able to like have a framework for just figuring out what those are and writing them down, right? And then once we have those, hopefully we can connect them to accuracy metrics, and then we can decide like, does the data actually meet the utility goals? I don't know whether this is the right structure. So like, this is our best guess so far, but I'm really curious, what people think about this. We're just getting started on this. Okay, so the final one, and I'll try to go quickly here. How do we convince the lawyers? So this is one that I had not heard very much about until like this week. And a lot of people have talked about convincing lawyers this week. So there's lawyers over here. So can we like make these circles overlap? I don't know. So one thing that I can offer here, right? I think a thing I have assumed is that we're a little ways from from standardization. And Naomi Lefkowitz from NIST gave a talk the other day and kind of implied like we need to be a little bit patient. And Ashwin asked this question that was more of a comment that was like, why do we need to be patient, right? Like, how do we accelerate it? What levers can we push to like accelerate this? Because it's really important to get it done quickly. And so that kind of changed the way I thought about this a little bit. My thought was, if we move quickly towards standardization, we might get it wrong. We might make people upset. And I still think that's true. But I wonder if there's value in like doing it quickly, even if we get it wrong. NIST, I think, is in a position, and there's some other people, in positions to listen to us. Like we have maybe levers that we can push on. And so, maybe it is worth pushing on those quickly, even if we're not exactly sure we're going to get it right. And I don't know about this either, but it's like a thing I hadn't thought about before this week, and I've thought about it a little more this week. So like if we had a bad standard for differential privacy, would that be better than having no standard at all? So maybe not, right? Like maybe not. So I'm curious to hear what people think about this. So that's it from me. I have that QR code there again. This is just a summary of everything I've said. So I don't know if we're doing questions right afterwards or not.
So sorry I'm a little late. I don't want to take time away from your question. Maybe one question and like in the time Brian can do that. I just feel like his own question is a little.
So I want to encourage everybody to form a bad standard, because the analogy is cryptography. In the 1980s, NIST was unwilling to put together a standard for public key cryptography. And so RSA Data Security put together a series of standards. And those are the public key cryptography standards. The same thing could happen here. Tumult and its competitors could get together and just create standards. And then NIST has the option of accepting them or not accepting them. But otherwise, you're not going to get anything. Don't wait for that. That's a question.
That's useful. Yeah. That's thank you. I love it.
Okay, let's say Joe. So our next speaker is going to be Ryan Steed, who is a PhD candidate at CMU. And like his expertise is in the area of sort of like an ethics and privacy, combining them. He has worked on sort of like a policy implications of DP on things like funding allocation, as well as adoption of tools like DP in sort of practice. So welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. This is a really great workshop. I love to hear people talking about the things that I've been thinking about for the last few years. So today I'm basically just going to throw some things at the wall. We did an interview study with a bunch of people deploying differential privacy across different organizations. So I'm going to show you some of the things they said, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one specific point, but I'll get to that. Before I talk about our study, though, and this I did not coordinate with Dana, but I wanted to bring up sort of a paper that I really like. It's from the field of algorithmic fairness. And basically this paper sort of summarizes a bunch of the traps that we can fall into as computer scientists when we think about socio-technical systems. And they call these like abstraction traps. I'm going to call them challenges. So one example is when you try to implement sort of formal definition like differential privacy in a real system. One problem is framing. You have to actually model the entire system and not just the sort of differentially private piece, because of course privacy exists in the context of an entire system. There's also like, the formalism trap, which is when you write down a definition that captures a very specific portion of what we call privacy more generally. And so you might run into failures where you haven't accounted for other forms of privacy that people care about. We've heard a lot of conversation about that. And then there's also like solutionism. The technical definition isn't always the right solution. The technology isn't all the right solution. Sometimes you need legal or policy approaches. And we have to consider that as well. And so I think the reason these are important is that we're actually seeing them come into play in practice. So you may have heard that Google's grand plans to replace the third-party cookie, which involved a lot of privacy-preserving technologies, not DP as far as I know, but similar ideas of trying to preserve privacy while doing some sort of analysis. Got a lot of pushback from both advertisers and also privacy advocates who sort of objected on some of these grounds. And they've actually now sort of scrapped those plans. I'm not sure what they're going to do next. And today I want to talk about another, this last trap here that our study really focused on, which is this idea of ripple effects. So when you introduce a technology into an organization, especially, it's going to change the way that organization acts, and it's going to interact with the existing sort of incentives in that organization. We talked about that a little bit this morning, and we heard about it a little bit in some of these other talks. And so specifically, in our study, we wanted to know when organizations are adopting these techniques, why are they doing it? And then how are those motivations that they have affecting the sort of design choices that they make? And then crucially, how are those design choices, what does that mean for us and for us as sort of people online who care about privacy? And so what we did was, as I mentioned, talk to a bunch of people working on this at 21 different organizations, and then try to connect it to some different ideas from STS, from economic sociology, and some other fields. And one of the main things that we found that I'll focus on is that adoption of this technology, as we discussed today, requires a lot of interpretations. Actually, Jayshree and Dana have a great paper about sort of interpretive flexibility in the context of differential privacy and the census. But there's also so one of the concerns about that is that if all these organizations have to do a lot of interpretations to implement these systems, and they have to make a lot of decisions in gray areas, they might use that gray area to sort of make decisions that benefit the organization. And in many cases end up in what we worry about, like privacy theater or adoption for show. And so I'm going to try and like walk through how that kind of happens, and then maybe suggest some things that contribute to it or might help to prevent it. But I really don't know the answer to this, just like Joe. So I hope we'll discuss it more in the breakout sessions. So yeah, basically we talked to a bunch of executives and directors who are in charge of sort of approving and running these projects, privacy preserving projects, including differential privacy. Managers, also individual contributors doing research, engineering, product, policy, legal. So we tried to get a lot of people across the different groups that we've talked about. And we tried to get a bunch of different types of organizations, tech companies, privacy startups, nonprofits, and also government agencies. And we sort of organized our analysis into 3 parts. So the first part is sort of the narratives that companies are using when they talk about these projects. And these are the sort of arguments that practitioners are making to convince executives to invest in, as we mentioned, what is a very like long and costly process a lot of the time. And these are, I talked about abstraction traps. These are very abstract. I think the nuances get very specific. Different organizations have different sort of politics, and those do matter. But in general, you had like cases where organizations were adopting to try and preserve some sort of operation they were already doing. So not necessarily making new data available, but trying to react to consumers' new privacy expectations or maybe new regulations. Then you have the cases where consumers are trying to sort of benefit from privacy, so use it to improve their operations, release new data. In the case of a company like maybe DuckDuckGo or Brave, they're using these techniques to actually get into a new market of people who really care about privacy. And then, you know, less frequently, people will argue that it helps overhaul data management practices as a whole, because to implement differential privacy, you maybe need to understand and organize your data better than you were before. And so the reason these sort of motivations matter is that the sort of next stage is turning those motivations into a privacy preserving or differential privacy system that will satisfy what these companies wanted to do. And, you know, as we discussed, it usually ends up with some people in a room, the lawyers, the business representatives, the engineers, scribbling on a whiteboard and trying to communicate with each other. Obviously, that's like an open problem that I think we've all talked about. But one other thing that we noticed happening is that the sort of decision problem when it comes to deciding on privacy parameters or deciding on how much privacy to provide, it's a lot of the time ended up being a sort of privacy is a minimum bar They would try to set the minimum bar possible to satisfy sort of the lawyers and the privacy people in the room. And then after that, just optimize business performance. So it wasn't really necessarily a trade-off. It certainly was a negotiation, but it was more a set a bar and then maximize after that. So that's the kind of conversation that we heard happening. And that conversation is happening in, like I mentioned, a big gray area. They're trying to convert these sort of relatively broad laws like GDPR or even HIPAA to what can we actually design and use in practice. And so they're coming up with standards out of thin air. They're setting these sort of magic numbers within their organizations that sometimes have justifications and sometimes don't. So it's a very, I guess, nebulous process at the moment. Yeah, so the reason this matters, and I think we discussed it, but I want to sort of emphasize one reason this really matters, which is that as these organizations are making these decisions and having this sort of opportunity to define what these technologies will look like in practice, everyone else is watching. And actually, if you go and look at like economic sociology or just sociology, there are a lot of interesting studies, like for example, by Lauren Edelman has a book called Working Law, which basically describes how in discrimination law, when discrimination law was first sort of coming into place, these organizations were like, okay, how can we react to this? Oh, let's use these like grievance procedures where employees can complain about discrimination. And there actually wasn't much empirical evidence that these were working very well, but they like got the courts to approve it. And then it sort of became the precedent for the whole industry for quite a while. And so you can imagine like the first few implementations of differential privacy of these other technologies could end up setting a precedent for future regulations and future practices. And so I have these interesting quotes from some of the people we talked to, basically saying like, the way that we justify these things is we sort of have our statisticians stand up and say, yes, we think the risk is very low, good enough. And you've probably also seen sort of the privacy policy and marketing materials where they'll just say, hey, we use differential privacy, no additional detail, no additional like discussion of what actually that means in that setting. So sometimes the justifications are very sort of flimsy, but then these systems can still go a long way. And of course, when we talk to people who care about privacy in these companies, they had concerns that the ways they were building these systems were not sort of up to scratch. And this could take the form of sort of relaxing that privacy bar. It could take the form of making exceptions in certain like revenue-centric products. It could also take the form of, oh, we implement DP, but only for certain like applications that are sort of peripheral to what we really care about and what we really make money from. So maybe keyboards, but not ads, right? This is the kind of ways that this could happen in sort of an organizational setting. And we in the paper try to talk a little bit about what this actually looks like and why it might work. But basically it comes down to the sort of ability to decouple what you're saying externally, how you're justifying these projects, and the sort of legitimacy benefits that you're getting from actually what you're building in practice. And so we think it's more likely to happen in sort of these large organizations that are trying to preserve an existing practice. So maybe it's targeted advertising, for example. Sort of on the plus side, we also notice that there are a lot of motivated practitioners, like the people in this room, that are doing a lot of legwork within these organizations to build sort of central privacy teams. Although a lot of those teams are being broken up more recently. We've seen that happen over the last couple of years. But internally, there's a lot of advocacy and experts have a lot of leverage over sort of how this process goes. So I'm going to like basically go through a bunch of different like things that we think maybe could help. And this are based on suggestions that we've gotten from people we talked to and also from lessons from different fields of research. I think that one of the ones we've talked about, and I think Joe actually did a great job of talking about this in your presentation, but like providing guidance. So as experts, we have a lot of leverage over how this interpretation happens. And regulators especially seem to want to know what kind of guidance they should give. So can we give them a bad standard, for example? Can we give them something to work with? And that could be a process. If you don't want to give them a specific epsilon value, it could be a process for making these decisions in a way that isn't just, anything, below epsilon equals 50 is fine, which is sort of maybe the way that it's happening right now. And then, in the cases where you can't be specific enough with guidance, setting up systems for rigorous scrutiny, which is one of the really important things in a case of discrimination law, for example. One of the ways that these bad compliance practices get propagated is if they aren't sufficiently scrutinized by the courts. So setting up ways for external researchers to use some of those privacy auditing techniques that we've been talking about. One of the things that's going to be required is to come up with ways that practitioners can share what they're doing. And obviously there's a lot of hesitancy if you go to like the sort of research community network, these sorts of events, you hear companies like, yeah, we want guidance from regulators, but we're unwilling to share what we're doing right now because we don't want to be the first one to get fined or to get slapped on the wrist. So coming up with ways for practitioners to share those choices and so that experts like the people in this room can scrutinize those. We've seen a lot of cases where expert scrutiny and papers on, for example, Apple's like emoji system or critiques of Google's privacy sandbox have actually had effects on those efforts. So setting up ways to do that, I think, is really important to avoid this sort of privacy theater idea. And then the last one I'll mention is finding ways to shift power to data subjects. This doesn't have to be like coming up with a way to explain differential privacy to data subjects, although I think that is very important. It could also be finding a way to shift power to their advocates and bringing them into the conversation. So you have your experts, you have your advocates, and then you have your data users. And then I'll also mention, I don't know if there are any policymakers in this room, but I know there are people from the government. I think encouraging policymakers to avoid sort of blanket exceptions, blanket endorsement of these practices. That's one thing that we've seen happen in other areas of law that we don't really want to happen here. And to sort of get involved with these disclosure efforts and these guidance efforts. Yeah, so with that, I'll leave extra time for questions. I tried to go fast, so. Yeah, I'm gonna come hand out my. There you go.
Thanks, Ryan. That was really interesting. I was wondering on the avoid blanket exceptions or endorsements of practices. Do you have any particular advice on how you would argue to a policymaker that they shouldn't feel like exceptions are an okay thing to make?
I don't know if it would be a hard argument. So I've talked to people at certain regulatory agencies that I won't mention who have like done this before, where they have to go to companies and they have to set up like an audit regime, for example, as a result of some sort of legal action, not to be more specific, right? But there is already a tension, I think, for regulators between being specific and leaving room for what might happen in the future. So that might be one way to sort of argue for it, is to say like, we don't know what's going to happen next, so we don't want to like say that this technique will always work or that this particular value of epsilon will always work. So arguing on the basis of nuance might be helpful. And then I also think like, I think maybe one other thing that gets talked about a lot, especially like the AI auditing space, is the sort of power of the crowd. And the crowd in this case being the sort of independent researchers and civil society organizations who have a stake in this kind of work and actually will voluntarily or through grants do some of this auditing work or scrutinizing themselves. And so if you sort of pitch to a policymaker, maybe you can say, oh, we have this group of people who are interested in this and do studies on this. If you can make information available to those people, then they can help do this sort of ongoing work. Maybe one reason to issue a blanket endorsement is you don't want to revisit every single use case. Those are my vague ideas, but I'm not a lawyer and I feel like there are probably better ideas out there. So I'd be glad to hear other people's thoughts during the breakout.
So I like, so you're talking about transparency, you know, sharing information between practitioners, things we do towards stepping towards a standard. I just want to do a little plug again for, you know, data dependent properties, data dependent breakpoints and so on, because their utility is another aspect of this. We've got parameters that impact utility. Some of those are parameters about the structure of the data or just the size of the data. If you're using this for selling advertising and you fail to advertise to some group, we will all be okay. If you were using this, well, maybe we won't all be okay, but it would be better than if we are using this for evidence-based policy making, right? So when you're looking at, you know, ESA's acceptable performance, when we're setting out to make our bad standard, we should be looking at data dependent breaking points. We should be looking at structural error. We should be looking at things to say whether this is safe to use for a given epsilon parameter, given data traits, and given, utility needs. That's my point.
Just like to remind you that when Facebook failed to advertise ads for apartments to people who were not white, it caused a real problem.
Let's say about the rest of the break. Let's say Fran again. And our third speaker is going to be, I think, Sean, who is an associate professor at Penn State. She's an expert in thinking about like a decision making surrounding like a security and privacy, and she has work at developing explanations about differential privacy. So thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ai Ping. I'm very glad to share some of our research finding regarding communicating differential privacy to end user. I really enjoy the talk by Joe and Ryan, and in particular in the bubble that Joe listed, I would argue there is one bubble that you have missed, which is the end user. Right now, I'm switched the gear a little bit and show some of the data we obtained from the end user's perspective. This project is about exploring use of the explanative illustrations to communicate DP to end user. This is a project through collaboration with PhD students and faculty members from Purdue University and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Okay, so I think consider most of us are experts in this domain, so I will not re-emphasize the importance of exploring and designing differential system in the data-driven world nowadays, because we know there is a good balance we can achieve potentially between the group level utility and the individual level privacy by leveraging DP. So the when we talk about differential privacy, most of the case we talk about the central model, which means the noise has been added at the aggregated level. However, there are different models or trust models have been proposed and implemented in the wild and in the literature. For example, the local differential privacy. So instead of adding noise at the aggregate level, so those noise are added at the individual level in order to achieve so-called better privacy protection. And of course, there are some extra utility costs within those techniques. So our group hold the idea, in order to design or deploy effective privacy enhancing technology or so-called end user kind of friendly privacy enhancing technology, we need to understand whether user they really appreciate the privacy protection as well as the associated cost, and whether they're willing to adopt or not adopt those techniques or the technology we developed it. So our group take the first step on this line of work by communicating DP concept using text description. As all of you may know, so those companies, they post all these descriptions on their website in order to be transparent about the technology they're using. So we, reviewed a lot of those descriptions and constructed a few different descriptions from our perspective, and we conducted a user study. And after our paper in Oakland 2020, we saw a lot of ongoing work along this direction. So we're happy to see that. For example, the work from Rachel and her colleagues, and there is a bunch of researchers in Europe. They also conducted this line of work. So collectively, those studies have found the text description, in particular, talking about the implications of differential privacy techniques or their models, are effective to help people understand this technique and also help them make so-called informed decision when they're sharing their data. In particular, for Rachel and her colleagues' work, they found that those kind of description are also good at set appropriate privacy expectations from end users' perspective. So those prior work are great. I think they move forward our understanding regarding communicating DP to end user. However, I would argue there are some parts we haven't taken care in those work. The first thing is in those descriptions, we tend to focusing on the privacy protection of DP technique, but neglect the associate cost, which is the utility cost that has been associated, right, with these techniques. The other aspects is the trust model. I introduced the central DP and a local DP at the beginning of my presentation. In fact, there are other trust models have been proposed in the literature. For example, the shuffler DP, and I think currently there are a lot of discussion about the federal kind of the learning in the DP setting. So in this work, I will explain or share with you. So we looked into the communicating not only the privacy protection, but also the associated utility cost to end user. And we, in particular, focusing on 3 different DP models: central DP, local DP, and a shuffler DP. I will explain what I mean shuffler DP in a few slides here. So those are the research questions we looked into in this study. This is a user study. So instead of the interview approach that Rian took, we take the so-called experimental approach, which means we design the different, the illustration. I will explain what I mean illustration in the next slides, and present those descriptions to end user and looked into their perceive the privacy protection, the associated utility cost, and their willingness to share data using those kind of stimuli. And another question we looked into is whether the different DP trust model or the so-called different DP mechanism matters when end user making their data sharing decision. In order to enhance the robustness of this finding, we explore this question in different data use scenarios. Due to the time consideration, I will not go through all the explanatory illustration that we proposed in the study. Here, I just used the shuffler DP as an example. So the illustration or the explanatory illustration is a idea that have been investigated a lot in psychology, in particular training and education domain. So we leverage the idea depict the flow of the information in the noise or random noise adding process. We leveraging the location data in our study. As you can see, we depict, a bunch of users' location information at the beginning, and then we show them there is a DP technique that have perturbed the location information. So such kind of perturbation can be happening different way. Consider, there are different kind of noise level can be added. And then there is a shuffler introduced in this shuffler DP model. Shuffler, you can treat it as an anonymity kind of mechanism. What the role played by the shuffler is to, disconnect the data user as well as end the report that will be, generated after all those techniques. So because of this anonymity process, what you can imagine is the random noise that we added at the beginning can be relatively reduced. So therefore, shuffler DP, in fact, achieved a so-called balance between central DP and the local DP. So that's why, people are interested in this mechanism. So we want to see whether any user can understand this and whether, they're willing to share the data by leveraging those kind of DP mechanism. So beyond those kind of description using some of the icons or the data flow, we also have this detailed description about the overall process. So this is kind of aligned with the text description we have before. So we want to have all those information to be explicit to the participants or the end user. So this is the utility cost part that we designed in our study. Because of the use of the location data, so we leverage the map. As you can see, we use the heat map to showing the trajectory of a bunch of users in the specific location. I think it's not hard to tell this is a map about New York City. So as you can see, this red dot we call it actual data, which means this is the data without any perturbation. And then we deployed 3 different techniques and show some change about the pattern of the dots. Considering all our participants could be end user, those kind of pattern change might not be intuitive to them. We add another layer by using this grid, and within each grid, we depict the number of the participants, within that grid. As you can see, there is a lot of change on this number to indicate the associated cost by leveraging, different DP trust model and mechanisms. As I explained before, so we take an experimental design approach. We recruit participants on Amazon Mechanical Turk after, we have all those illustrations ready. So we first conduct a pilot study. As you can see, there are a lot of things going on in the description and also the illustration we design here. We want to make sure, those things are really understandable and could potentially be useful. So therefore, we first run a validation survey with a small number of participants to look into the design and the overall survey flow. After that, we also conduct a very, intensive interview with a few participants to make sure, we can learn more detailed from them regarding the overall illustration design and the overall survey flow. In fact, we learn a lot through this pilot study. In the illustration that I showed you before, like this one, as you can see, we inserted quite a lot of icons that we used in the illustration. In fact, this is something we learned from the pilot study. Another thing is the flow, the information flow that I showed you previously in the illustration. It involves a lot of steps. So there are also suggestions from participants, why not you present all those details in a step manner, which means separate them into different pages. So that's why we included a so-called animation condition in our formal study, which means we separate those steps in the illustration and show them to the participants. So the goal for this kind of manipulation is to increase the end user's attention to all the details in each step. However, we didn't obtain any significant difference between the animation and the illustration or the static condition. So in the later results, I will not, move to those details. So in the study, we evaluate participants' understanding of the DP. This is somewhat, critical in a lot of end user study. DP, as we learned from the previous two talk, even is not that easy to understand for so-called experts. So therefore, in order to argue, all the privacy protection understanding or the utility cost that we obtain in the study are based on the user's comprehension. So we have this as a guarantee at the beginning and then evaluate the 2 key measures we're interested in, the privacy and the utility perception, as well as the data sharing decision. So the study was conducted on Amazon Mechanical Turk. All those things are the typical MTech user. In fact, we also check the participants' DP background. In fact, most of them don't have the DP background. So the study, in fact, was conducted around 2021-ish. And I think at that time, we don't have a lot of DP study on those online platforms. So that might be the reason for this distribution. So here is the comprehension results for each of the trust model that we explained. We ask participants 1 comprehension question, and this is the question that we posted in the study. For each question, in fact, we asked the participant 2 times. So after the first question, we will give them the feedback to let them know whether they answered correctly or not correctly. If they don't answer correctly, we will present the description and the illustration again and check them the second time. And as you can see, compared to the central DP and the shuffler DP, so the correct rate for the local DP is even less than the chance. So these results clearly show in particular, when participants view the illustration or the description about the local DP, they still have difficult to understand the implications of the random noise addition. As you can see, our question here are mainly centered on their understanding about the implication of adding random noise. So across the two questions, as you can see, there is a slightly increase about the accuracy rate, which means that certain feedback and multiple chance allow participants to learn can enhance their comprehension about those concepts and the techniques. So next, let's move to the kind of the critical results here. Given, there are participants show not good understanding of these techniques. So for the following two measures, we only include the participants who at least answer two of those comprehension questions correctly. So this is the privacy protection perception and the utility cost perception results. So the data are structured like this. In the x-axis, we listed the 3 different trust models that we evaluated in this study. So the dashed bar corresponding to the animation and the solid bar corresponding to the illustration. As I said before, there is no statistic difference here, so you don't need to worry about the comparison between those 2 bars. In the study, considering the fundamental difference between the central DP and the local DP. So we also counterbalance the order between those 2 different models. The shuffler DP, as I explained before, while it has a shuffler, added, so the mechanism is more close to the local DP. So that's why we only counterbalance the order of the central and the local, but not included the shuffler DP. As you can see here, we obtain a main effect of model, which means across the 3 models, the central, the local, and the shuffler participant, they perceive the highest privacy protection for local model. Well, I think this is good, indicating their perception is corresponding to the technique that we explained to them. And then you can see the second one will be the shuffler DP, and then the central DP, the least. I want to pinpoint that there is another interesting finding here, which is the 2 interaction of the model and order. While there is a main effect order, but it's really qualified by the 2 interaction, which means if we let people know there is a central DP technique, if you explain it at the beginning, that's fine. People perceive the more privacy protection from it. However, if you present it, after some stronger protections, their privacy protection perception reduced significantly. And I will talk about, the implication of this finding when we move to the discussion slides.
I think we should maybe take 1 more minute.
Sure. Oh, sorry, I lost track of the time. For the utility cost, in general, we didn't find any significant difference here. And this is a summary of the previous results. And here's the data sharing results. In general, it follows the same pattern. We find the main effect of model, the order, and then the 2 interaction. As I explained before, we evaluated the results in different scenarios. We also find a main effect of scenario, which means people generally willing to share data in the public good scenario, which means, in the pandemic situation or some public health situation, they're willing to share the data. I think this is well aligned with the literature. In summary, as you can see, regardless of scenario, participants, they prefer strong privacy protection. And moreover, they can differentiate the different DP mechanism that we explained to them. Take home message. So our results indicate those illustrations that we designed and we evaluated can be effective to communicate the different models to the end user. And given those findings, we also advocate organization and the company, they should consider being transparent on the details about the DP deployment. So remember, I show a lot of description about those companies' DP implementation. I don't believe they mention explicitly about the trust model and also the choice of the epsilon, which have discussed it in the prior slides. Lastly, I want to mention the ordering effect that I explained before. Okay, so in fact, this can be related to some basic finding in psychology, which is called the effect of the reference frames. So it is critical that you have a relative base or the frame to the end user at the beginning, and then somehow, they will use it to compare the other technology or the new technology that you explain to them. So that's what we learned, from this study. In fact, we have a few other ongoing projects, in particular by leveraging, the different psychology series in the DP's communication, in particular from the end user's perspective. And we are willing, to discuss about the extra work about the data practitioner or even the developers by leveraging those technology. Yeah, at last, I want to thank the collaborators and our the funding agency. So that's all for my talk.
Thank you again to our speakers. I know these were short talks without as much time for some questions. We have a break now. There's no snacks. I'm sorry. Huh? Oh, okay. So we have a let's say take a 10-minute break. So sort of like, get up, stretch your legs. If you have any burning questions, ask the speakers. They're here. They're amazing. And then we're gonna reconvene for our breakout groups after the break. Okay, so we are gonna ask each group, send your person up here with the slides. Actually, do you want to run this or should I? Okay. I don't actually have everything planned. So for each group, send your person up here, whether it is your leader or a sort of designated speaker. And each group is going to get about 3 minutes. We know you had way more exciting conversations than that, but sorry. And we'll start with topic 1. Who's leading this one? I forgot which topic is which. Implementing DP in practice.
I think you were still typing while you were talking.
Okay.
Is it possible to slideshow and start it again?
Yeah.
We did finish it, I promise.
Oh,
can you do refresh the page?
Yeah, oh, okay. Oh, you're right. There's so many more things there. Okay. Amazing. Okay.
Never knew that about slides.
Okay. Hi, so we're talking about implementing DP in practice, technical and socio-technical challenges. And I guess, how many minutes do I have? Three. Oh, okay. So we started by asking the question that is kind of that was mentioned in the TPDP conference, like DP is not DP is not like where DP cannot be used in practice, where can it be used in practice and where can it not be used in practice, and different questions. But we came up with this the summary of on the slides where we say decision makers need concrete costs and benefits when talking about when deciding about differential privacy. So like we need to come up with a variety of realistic attacks and threat models that might provide tools for provide tools for doing this kind of attacks. And then we're also talking about we also talked about different ways about utility and being transparent about utility and trust. And we said DP can impact different subgroups, especially like minority groups. So like the way you collect your data sizes matter, and DP can be worse when in some cases, like DP can be worse when the data is when you don't have any data. So low signal in your data can cause you to have be very confident when make wrong decisions. So you should maybe sometimes DP is not the best thing to apply to your data because sometimes it's really bad, but it can also enable you to have more granular access to data. And I guess one of the recurring final thing in our conversation was applying practical data infrastructure issues can to interact with differential privacy. So removing user IDs to save disk space, and we had a conversation about how companies do this. So they remove different user IDs and store the data. So sometimes it is hard to bound user contributions because companies do this kind of thing. So sometimes storage space is not very when the storage space is too much, DP is not necessary sometimes to add it to use there. And yeah, if DP slows down the data pipeline, then it can be too costly sometimes. So that's kind of the summary of what we talked about.
Very nice. How do I do this? Topic 2, should I refresh and reslide show? Okay. I learned something new today.
Okay, so we spoke about a lot of different things. We went a little off topic at times, but one of the big questions that we started with was how far should we as a research community, as a community of experts, criticize deployments of DP, because this can, in a concrete way impact the deployments of DP that are out there. And one of the examples that was brought up was we're willing to allow the Census Bureau a lot of leeway. And there was this sense when they were kind of adopting differential privacy, let's not criticize it publicly because, that could be enrolled by bad actors to essentially prevent deployments of DP and things like that. But there were other deployments, like deployments by Google, that were criticized more heavily, which, caused those deployments to be dropped. So in some sense, we're collapsing to this trust model of criticism on, DP deployments, where there are actors we're willing to trust and others we're not willing to trust. And we need to think, deeply as a community about how far we should be criticizing these deployments. And then how can we actually evaluate whether, differential privacy provides the protections that a layperson might think of when we say that a system is private? And the point that was brought up here is that there are people who can do this reasoning, and we are maybe at least the technical experts in the room, or maybe not those people to be doing this reasoning. So what kind of tools can we provide as a technical community to people who should be doing this reasoning? And a couple points that were brought up is that we don't have many yardsticks, and we don't have, at least very public or many, smoking guns that we can really point to and be like, here's the things that you're protecting against, here's the problem. And so then we're not providing strongholds for, these experts to actually do this reasoning, to convince people to, figure out where their trade-offs lie and which systems need something like differential privacy. And, another thing was that, there are transparent systems out there that implement DP, and they get attacked more than people that just say, hey, this system is differentially private and don't give you any information. So in what sense we should be careful about that? And on the kind of topic of yardsticks and smoking guns, one of the points that was brought up that I think is kind of important and I hadn't thought about before is perhaps we should be aiming more resources at science communicators. Perhaps we should be aiming more resources at the media, because we're talking about oh, we should communicate with lawyers, we should communicate with policymakers, we should communicate with engineers, or people making decisions at companies. But what about the media, right? What about the people that are communicating to the general public? what about science communicators who, talk about things like cryptography and encryption and those kind of things a lot, but don't really talk about privacy, or even forget differential privacy, considerations for data privacy, about the fact that, linkage attacks exist and anonymization isn't enough. And the private parts of a data set don't really exist. So, maybe we should be aiming more resources at those people. Yeah, that's roughly what we spoke about.
Next, we have Priyanka or someone else. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So our group talked about facilitating engagement around DP. I'm gonna not talk about the last 2 bullet points because those magically showed up on our slides. And so we think they're from the Zoom participants. So I'll pass it over to them at the end. But one of our points is that it's important to really listen first when we're trying to figure out how to communicate between different parties. And this was brought up around a question around participatory DP. And so the idea that if we're gonna have a DP deployment, we want to include input from various parties. How do we do that? So one of the thoughts was, well, we need to have some communication strategies to each party, and to go into developing those strategies with some humility, and taking the stance that we might not know what people want to know going into it. Second, we were talking about this question about whether participatory DP deployments are always possible or whether they should always be done. And one of the challenges we talked about was that there might be cases where there are so many people involved, so many relevant parties or people, that it basically makes it impossible or not feasible to have a real participatory system. And so one of the potential solutions that we discussed was this idea of having representatives. So just like in government, we have elected officials or representatives that can advocate for the needs of large populations, and we might have something similar in terms of DP deployments, where you might have a representative from one relevant party to speak for the needs of that party and make sure those needs are considered. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to Zoom. I missed the chat, so I think someone might have said something.
Thank you. I just added a couple things from our Zoom discussion. One is maybe a larger question for the group, is that there's been a lot of research on participatory ML, and what lessons can we learn from that line of work over the last several years. And the other thing that came up was that maybe we need to take a step back when we're trying to facilitate engagement, and even get back to trying to understand what people mean when they're talking about privacy, what different parties what are their pain points when they're engaging with data systems, it was even brought up, basic discussions around security versus privacy are often where we have to start before we can even get to the questions around differential privacy, parameters, and that kind of engagement. So I think maybe really taking a step back and doing a lot of the questions before we ask the questions. And I think that's it.
Great, thank you. And topic 4, Mina.
Yeah, so our group talked a bit about how responsible implementation of DP or privacy more generally and responsible auditing sort of requires too much technical detail and too much expertise to write explicitly into a law. And so we sort of thought about regulations or laws having more natural language principles, and then guidance perhaps from agencies could help draw the line between these objectives and specific technical designs. I think a direction for further discussion that we were pretty excited about was learning from regulatory successes and failures in other domains. So things like cybersecurity, which we talked about potentially as a success story, versus like environmental protection or aviation security, where there are perhaps some failures or problems that we could learn from. And in general, we talked about how it would be nice to have some kind of auditors with access to privacy systems, but we couldn't really nail down like how we thought this might work in practice, in part because we talked a lot about sort of controlling incentives and how to think about the role of self-regulation and regulatory capture more generally.
Thank you. Thank you to our 5 leaders. Thank you to the participants. Yeah, this is wonderful. We're now in our wrap up session. Is this me or you?
Yeah, so we really want this to be a community that lasts beyond today. And so we were trying to think about the best ways of really like cementing the community. And so one thing that we've put together is a contact sheet. So if you click on this link, or I guess you can't click on it, but if you type in yelkey.com/task, you'll be taken to a Google Sheets where you can enter your contact information as well as your general research interests. And we might try to set up some sort of email list, or maybe we'll try to make a Slack group. In some way, we'll contact you after this. And so that way we can all stay in touch. So that's like one idea, but we're also really, really open to your thoughts on how we should all stay connected. And so we also wanted to use the last 10 minutes or so to open the floor to you all to provide suggestions on what would be most helpful for you as we try to take on these research questions going forward. I guess before I fully open up the floor, I'll mention one other idea we had was to create some sort of a booklet, like a community booklet where people can submit their information. So like their research interests, their contact information, what they're working on. And then we can put that information on like just a simple static website or something, so that if other people want to look for folks working on these sorts of topics, they can easily find it, and we can create it such that new members can join at any time. So that's like one idea. So maybe by a show of hands, how many people would be interested in having something like that and would submit your like profile, so to speak, to that? Okay. Maybe if it's well designed, you'll want to do it. Okay.
I have a couple more ideas I want to throw out. The first one is, because we are here with these sort of like an OpenDP meeting, one like a possibility is to like turn this into a formal working group through OpenDP. They would be happy. And the question is like, what should that look like? What type of level of engagement would you want to have? What type of like goals of the working group would you want to have? What sort of things should the working group strive to like produce? We've also talked about a like pretty big in scope space today across our 4 different topics. Do we want to like scope things to be smaller and to say the working group is going to really focus on this thing, and if so, what things? So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, and then there's a lot of resources, and we just want to hear like where should we go from here, so that this is not a like one-day event and then it's done forever.
So maybe a practical proposal. I think if someone asked me like, do you want to join a work group that will do blah, 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 like some great goal? So I don't know, because, right, like we want to have a lot of great things, and we have limited time, but having something very, very concrete, like if 3 people here would say like, well, I would really like to create a web page that will have all the best examples of real world attacks that happened and had a big effect. So like, that's very concrete. Like I have a bunch scattered in my email or whatever, and probably everyone else. Like, so maybe like having many micro things, and then I mean, someone has to coordinate it, so it won't be like 1,000 different web pages that are not connected to each other. But like, it's much easier, I think, to work together on a small task than like something major at the beginning, at least.
Any other thoughts? Even follow-up stuff? No problem.
There didn't seem to be a whole lot of interest in the directory idea. But just like one example from BU has this group, the Hariri group, which is kind of the effort for interdisciplinary research. And a lot of people have their kind of, affiliations with this group. You can get your name and a little description of why your research ideas kind of interact with that group on the webpage. And one of the things that's come out of that is when I'm looking for somebody to work with on interdisciplinary research, it's a really useful tool to go look there, right? And right now I've had people come up to me and tell me like, hey, I happen to find your webpage, but is there a way for me to know, other people who care about privacy in the real world, who care about, policies around privacy and how we're doing privacy right now? And it would be so nice to be able to tell them, yeah, here's this great webpage and all these great people who have awesome ideas and like great, work that they're doing in the real world, and you could go talk to them. And there's little blurbs. So I think something like a webpage where we can kind of put up information about ourselves could be really useful. So it might be worth reconsidering if you weren't considering it at first notice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of plus one on that and say that I have like 7 blog posts that I've written and not posted because I know they're wrong in some way and they're like kind of philosophizing about policy in some way, and I don't have anyone to send them to see if I'm making sense or if this is interesting. And if there was a place where I could look to find people who have agreed to look at this would help me. And so plus one.
Thanks for hosting this event today. I'm very sorry to join late, so hopefully the point I'm making hasn't been mentioned before. I think we're doing, I don't know, research on like socio-technical evaluation, auditing, user-centered evaluation of privacy. I find there's not that many places to talk about it. There's some big conferences, and like I come from academia, so you can go to the security and privacy, and like now they start to have like tracks these conferences. You can go to CHI, you can go to FACT. But maybe one thing to be strategic would be to think about placing workshops at some of these events and try to see how actually, instead of having like one event here, we can try to build upon these conferences and have try to have events at each of these each of this community to try to get some momentum and also attract people from this community who see, oh, like, I don't know, I go to CHI every year, and now I see there's like events that start talking about evaluation of privacy technology, and I go to FACT, and it's not only like LLM and AI, there's like privacy techniques, etc.
That's actually how TPDP started. It was a workshop attached to a rotating set of conferences to try to find people who might be interested in differential privacy.
One follow-up question to your question, which is like, you mentioned CHI, but what are some other conferences that you think this type of event would be suitable for?
Thanks. For people online, question about what other conferences. I'm not sure actually, because like, I mean, I come from computer science, so there's all the like, I don't know, like trifecta of the like security privacy, like CCS, Usenik security, and the other in this range, but that is there. But they're all fairly technical, and they appeal to people who come with like machine learning, cryptography, computer science, security background. And then there's a lot of places that like don't really talk to these communities. There's like places like CPDP, more on policy regulation, and places like what RightCon maybe, or like isn't there like sociologists, like and ethnographs, policymakers, lawyers, but really not too much at the intersection. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I missed some places.
I'll add one. This past year, just there was Gen Law at ICML, which was kind of like law and mostly machine learning. And I think this is their second year. I think this might be a partnership that might be good.
I'm going to throw out one more question. What type of resources should we be thinking about developing today while we're all in the same room, or like in the next week while it's fresh, that would be valuable to the folks in the room to make it feel like a connected community? Like I know that we spoke about doing a blog post. Would that be helpful to sort of spread the word? Are there other types of sort of like output products that we feel like if they existed, our lives might be better for it?
Maybe the obvious answer is maybe exactly what we were just discussing, which is a list of conferences which we think are amenable to this sort of work. And that is a way of building the community, because then we have a place to, yeah, or a place to go and meet up again in the.
Even just news, like. Even not just like the list of potential ones. It's like I find myself before ICML and NeurIPS and AAAI and whatever, and I like to go once they publish their workshops to see, like, I just search the word privacy or something like that and see, like, do I want to go there or whatever. So like the Slack sort of serves the same way we have Gautam always does the filtering for us and finds all the good or whatever, all the privacy papers that pass the threshold that he thinks are even worth sharing. Like, and he spends like, I assume, quite a lot of time on that, but like, okay, there's a big enough community, so he feels like it's worth it. So I don't know if Slack is the best, but like if there was somewhere where it was easy to send the news to everyone, and then like everyone sends his news, it starts to accumulate.
Do we want like a Slack channel on the OpenDP Slack? Do we want an email listserv? Do you want both?
Maybe we can just do a vote.
Yeah.
So maybe by a show of hands, if there was a Slack channel on the OpenDP Slack workspace, would you join? Oh, nice. Most everyone. And then if there was an email list, like a Google Groups, would you join? Slightly less enthusiasm.
They're going to ask if like it's one better than like the other. They complementary.
More than happy to create the Slack channel, more than happy to create a working group. And you know what? We are more than happy to host the page on the website. So done.
Thank you, Sharon. Yes. Okay, we're at time. Any final comments before we return to our real lives? Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah, so once again, thank you so much to our speakers, to our breakout leaders, and to our hosts from OpenDP and TPDP. And especially a big thanks to everyone here who joined us today and had some really engaging and interesting conversations with us. All right, thank you.
It's